The room can be quiet while we open a careful story. The title says medieval, but our path will actually walk through ancient Greek streets, where different words and rules shaped lives. Many people today use medieval loosely to mean very old, so we will gently place the story in its proper time and let the Greek terms breathe. What did people really mean by a concubine in that world, and how was she different from a wife or a famous courtesan? Could a woman in that role gain freedom, keep savings, or see her children recognized, or did the door always stay closed? And what did an ordinary day feel like inside the household? What rooms, what meals, what work, and what moments of calm? These questions will wait like small lamps along a hallway. We will move softly, explain terms in simple words, keep the tone respectful, and admit where our sources are thin or biased. You will hear how law, money, custom, and feeling tangled together, and how a life could be tender in 1 hour and narrow in the next. We begin by fixing our words. Then we follow the daily steps. Settle in for a quiet beginning. The room can be dim, the air a little cool, and your breath slow. Before we can talk about real lives, we need to place our story in the right time and give our words careful edges. The title says medieval, but the life we are exploring belongs to a much older world. Ancient Greece stood many centuries before the castles and cathedrals of medieval Europe. Different clothes, different laws, different city-states with their own habits. We start here because when the time is wrong, everything that follows tilts. Like a painting hung on a slant. Think of the Greek world as a cluster of small cities and islands, each with its own accent and its own rules. Athens did things one way, Sparta another, Ionia along the coast another still. People spoke Greek, but not always the same kind, and they did not all agree on what to call the same relationships. That is why a modern word like concubine can be both helpful and a little misleading. It gives us a handle, but the handle does not always fit the door. In a moment, we will place the Greek words gently in your hands, one by one, and let them tell us where to stand. The most ordinary word for a married woman in Athens was simply wife, the partner in a lawful marriage set up through family agreement and a dowry. She lived inside the household and produced legitimate children who could inherit the family property and name, the home itself. The oikos gives you a clue. A house was not only walls, it was a family and its goods managed together. Over that house stood a male guardian, usually the husband, called the kyrios, the one legally responsible for contracts and lawsuits. This arrangement, like a frame around a canvas, shaped who could sign papers and whose voice counted in public. In a moment, we will set the wife down gently and pick up the word that matters most for our night. Concubine is a modern label we use to talk about women who lived with a man in a steady sexual relationship outside formal marriage. The Greek word most often used in this sense is palaki. It carries a range of meanings across centuries, but in simple terms it points to a recognized partner without the full rights and ceremony of a wife. A palaki might be a slave woman, a freed woman, or a free woman without a dowry, who entered a household as a companion. Her presence could be open within the house and known to neighbors, even if the law did not treat her like a wife. The line between respect and vulnerability ran through that word. In a moment, we will place two nearby words beside it, because later stories often blur them all together. A famous word you may know is hetaira. It sometimes gets translated as courtesan, and it referred to educated companions who moved in social spaces where wives rarely went dinners, drinking parties, performances. Some hetarai managed their own money, chose clients, and became famous for wit or music. They were not the same as a household concubine, though a few lives moved between these categories over time. Another word, porn, points more directly to commercial sex, tied to brothels or street work, with less power to choose terms. These words, hetaira, porn, palaki, sat near each other in the language, but they marked different paths and different risks. In a moment, we will add one more quiet term that hides in the background of many rooms. Doul means a female slave, and you also see paidisk for a maid or girl in service. Many concubines in Greek households were slaves or had been slaves, and that status touched every part of life work, movement, safety, and hope. A woman could be both a palaki and a doul at the same time, which makes the story delicate. Greek law cared more about a person's status than about romance. This does not mean affection never lived in those rooms. It means the law looked past it. Many historians think this is one reason our sources speak in flat tones, while the real lives were full of complicated feeling. In a moment, we will look at why our sources sound the way they do. Most of what we know comes from male voices, court speeches, philosophy, comedy, inscriptions, medical texts. These were written or controlled by men, often citizen men, for public settings. Women in those texts appear when they collide with law or laughter, not when they stir a pot or soothe a child. A famous Athenian orator once divided women into 3 roles: companions for pleasure, concubines for daily care of the body, and wives for legitimate children. The line sounds tidy, but it comes from a courtroom where a man was trying to persuade a jury with easy boxes. It tells us what he wanted his fellow citizens to nod along with, not the whole truth of every house. In a moment, we will return to the house and let the walls loosen those boxes, because Greek cities did not share one rulebook. The same word could travel differently from island to island. In Athens, citizenship for children depended on strict rules about the mother's status in certain periods. In other places, rules were looser. A palaki in one city might be a tolerated second partner. In another, she might be rarely mentioned but commonly present. The theater jokes that survived from Athens loved to lean on stock figures: the jealous wife, the wily hetaira, the lazy parasite. Those figures were made to make a crowd laugh, not to document living arrangements. If you think of them as cartoon masks, you will protect your view of the people behind them. In a moment, we will turn from masks to the quiet of daytime. Language also shifts across time like light in a room. A word that meant maid in an older poem might sound like slave in a later law. Translators sometimes choose a single English word for convenience, and then that choice hardens in popular writing, as if the Greeks had only one category in mind. They did not. They had a cluster of terms, and people lived in the gaps as much as in the titles. This is why you hear me say many historians think, or it's likely. When language wobbles and sources lean, it is kinder to be careful. In a moment, we will smooth one common wobble that makes this topic extra confusing. Some modern readers imagine concubinage as a kind of secret life, always hidden, always scandalous. In many Greek households it was not secret at all. It could be acknowledged inside the house and tolerated by neighbors, especially if the man was wealthy, or if the wife had died or could not bear children. What made the difference was law and custom, not whisper. A palaki could share the house, eat the same bread, even run parts of the household's work, yet she would not be called wife, nor would her children automatically share her partner's legal status. That difference between daily reality and legal title is the quiet hinge of our whole journey. In a moment, you will feel how that hinge swings when we talk about entrance and exit. It helps to hold one soft analogy in mind. Imagine a wardrobe with many garments. Wife is a formal robe with seals and signatures attached. Palaki is a working dress that fits daily life but lacks the formal embroidery. Hetaira is a gown for going out, with a price negotiated and sometimes a mind of its own. Dual is clothing chosen by someone else, often with no choice at all. A single woman's life could wear more than one of these at different times. Our sources try to pin the labels down, but the body moves inside the cloth. In a moment, we will step from the wardrobe back into the street and note the larger map that framed all of this. Greek cities built their order around citizenship, inheritance, and public life. Men who were full citizens stood in assemblies, served on juries, and passed property to sons born in lawful marriage. Women made those sons, citizens or not, by their own status. That is why the law watched the wife so closely and why other relationships were given fewer legal lights. But homes were real before they were legal, and a house with a palaki inside it still had laundry, sickness, songs, laughter, and bones tired at night. The language of law sketched the outline, life colored it in. In a moment, we will leave the vocabulary table and cross the doorway to the next question. We set out in our hook. You asked how a woman arrived at this place, how she crossed the threshold from the street to the house as a palaki. The path was not one path. War and slavery brought some women into households with no choice at all. Debt and poverty pushed others into arrangements that promised food and shelter. when no dowry could be found. A few were freedwomen who stayed by choice with a former owner, tying affection to a safer life, and a few were free, poor women who entered as informal partners in cities where custom allowed it. Each doorway shaped the day that followed. In a moment, we will step through those doors, softly and one at a time, and watch how a life began inside. For now, keep the words gentle in your hand, wife Palaki, Hitaira, Dul, and let them settle like small stones in a bowl of water. Settle your breath and come back to the doorway we left open. The words we placed in your hand, wife Palaki Hitaira, Dul, are still there, small and cool. Now we ask how a woman crossed the threshold to become a Palaki in an ancient Greek household. There was not one path. There were paths made by war, by poverty, by purchase, by affection, and by quiet bargains with the future. Each path set limits and hopes in different places, and each one shaped how the rest of the house would look at her. We will move slowly, because even simple facts ask for gentle handling here. War was a hard road that many did not choose. Captives taken in conflict might be sold into slavery, and from the market they could be brought into homes. Some women came as household slaves, first spinning, weaving, grinding grain, carrying water. Over time, a master or a son of the house might take one as a Palaki, a recognized partner without the title of wife. It is not a romantic sentence. It is a social fact in that world. The house did not forget her slave status just because she shared a bed. In a moment, we will step aside from war and look at softer, but still narrow, doors shaped by money. Poverty could open a door that marriage closed. In many cities, formal marriage rested on a dowry, a bundle of property, the bride's family, handed over to help support the new household and protect the wife if she was sent back. When a family could not raise a dowry, a free woman might enter an arrangement as a Palaki instead. Sometimes a guardian consented because food and shelter now stood within reach. Sometimes the woman herself chose the steadier roof. The neighbors might know the arrangement. The law would not treat it as a marriage. Soon we will return to the promises that tried to make such choices feel safer. A different path began after a slave woman could be freed and still remain with her former owner as a Palaki by agreement. Some cities used a device called manon, a promise written at manumission that the freed person would remain with the patron for set duties, or for life, in exchange for support. It was a legal leash and a lifeline at once. The terms could be kinder or stricter depending on the people and the place. Many historians think affection sometimes lived here, but the paper still mattered, more than feeling if things went wrong. In a moment, we will hold one of those papers up to the light. Written contracts were not the only tools, but they help us see. A pheromone clause might require service, loyalty, and the return of gifts if the freed woman left, while also promising maintenance, a room, clothing, and sometimes burial. Seals and witnesses gave weight to the document. Behind the words, a household rearranged its chairs. A former slave now had a name on a tablet, and perhaps a small purse of her own. Yet her freedom leaned against conditions, like a door held open with a heavy stone. If the patron died, everything could shift. In a moment, we will look at why some men chose this path instead of formal marriage. Men did not always have nor want every door that law allowed. Formal marriage tied property and politics into the bed. In Athens, during strict citizenship rules, a citizen man who married a non-citizen woman could not pass full citizenship to their children. Even before and after those laws, dowries and family alliances made marriage a public act with many eyes upon it. A widower might not wish to bind himself again to another family's kin. A man already married might seek children or companionship without breaking the social form of his marriage. A Palaki offered daily care and intimacy within the house, but without the weight of public ceremony. Soon we will sit with what this meant for the children who might be born. From the woman's side, each door opened certain rooms and closed. Others, a Palaki usually gained steady food, a bed, and a measure of safety from random buyers or brothel work. She might receive better clothing, some jewelry, and a trust to oversee linen, stores, or weaving rooms. If she had skill with numbers or trade, she might keep accounts or mind a small shop linked to the house. Yet she did not sit in the wife's place at religious rites. She did not walk in wedding processions as a bride. The law rarely called her lady of the house. Security depended on one man's will and on papers that might favor him if storms came. In a moment, we will let an analogy rest the idea in your mind. Think of these choices like living under different kinds of roofs. A legal marriage was a tiled roof held up by many beams. Family dowry, public recognition. A Palaki-S roof could be strong, even warm, but it often rested on one beam, a private agreement with a single household. If the beam stood true, life beneath it could be calm. If it cracked through death, debt, or anger, the rain came fast. This is why you will hear us return to manumission papers, savings, and witnesses when we talk about endings later. In a moment, we will return to the beginning again and follow one more path that sources often blur. Some women reached a household through purchase, but not for the reasons stories assume. A buyer might seek a skilled worker first, an experienced weaver, a wet nurse, a house manager. Sexual access sometimes came later, or not at all. Sometimes the line moved because of affection or the wishes of the house's women. It is easy to let one word, purchase, color the whole life with one paint. Real rooms had more colors. People argued, reconciled, shared jokes, and formed loyalties strange to outsiders. This does not turn a hard fact into a soft one. It simply widens the picture so that daily decisions are visible. Soon we will listen to how comedy and gossip shrank that picture into stock scenes. Public talk shaped memory. Popular plays loved the jealous wife and the sly concubine, just as modern shows love neat tropes. It is likely that many listeners carried those characters home and saw them in their neighbors, even when the real people were patient, tired, or kind. Later writers, centuries after the fact, also folded Greek terms into Roman ones and then into ours, stacking meanings until concubine sounded the same everywhere. Language drift and humor's echo helped myths grow tall. But inside houses, introductions were often quiet. A woman might enter with a small bundle, meet older servants, and be shown a room and a rhythm. In a moment, we will step into that first evening and feel how a routine begins. The first days set the tone. A senior woman of the house, perhaps the wife, perhaps an older slave, showed where water was kept, which loom was free, where keys hung, who woke first. If the wife lived there, her reaction mattered. In some homes, a wife ignored or supervised a palaki as another piece of household labor. In others, tension ran under every footstep, for obvious reasons of pride and power. Not all houses held both women. Sometimes a concubine entered because a wife had died, or because the man was not lawfully married. Many historians think the most peaceful arrangement came when roles were clearly named, even if unequal. Soon we will let the law speak, because law tried to name every chair. The last door to note is the one opened by a promise of future freedom. A man could say, "Stay with me, and I will free you," or "Bear me a child, and I will manumit you when I die." Such promises were sometimes written into wills or witnessed by friends. They could also vanish when the witnesses vanished. Hope hung in the air like a small lamp over a narrow stair. Women who could save, saved. Small coins tucked into belts. Favors banked with shopkeepers. Friendships grown with other freed people. It was planning and the language available. In a moment, we will climb from these plans to the law itself, where rights and limits were drawn in thicker ink. You can feel how each entrance path made different footprints. Captivity set one kind of step, poverty another, paperwork a third, affection a fourth. The same word palaki held all of them. That is why we were careful with language at the start, and why we remain careful now. We have reached the table, where the law sits citizenship, property, guardianship, manumission, and the status of children. The next stretch of our walk will be quieter and more precise, because the words on those tablets decided breakfast, inheritance, and goodbyes. Take a slow breath. In a moment, we return to the question we opened with, which doors really stayed closed, and which opened, at least a little, when a woman crossed into a Greek household as a palaki. Let the law sit in front of us like a careful ledger, and let the room stay calm while we read it slowly. You can think of this part as the frame around the painting we have been building. Inside the frame are meals, work, and quiet hours. The frame itself decides who can sign, who can keep, who can leave. In ancient Greek cities, the details changed from place to place, yet a few simple lines help us see the whole. A wife stood in the doorway of formal marriage, with a dowry behind her and public recognition beside her. A palaki stood in a nearer doorway, inside the same walls, but without those public beams. The difference did not always change daily kindness, but it changed the floor under her feet. In a moment, we will let property speak in plain words. Property in most Greek cities was steered by men who were full citizens. A wife brought a dowry, which her husband managed but did not own outright. If the marriage ended, law pressed him to return it to her family. That dowry acted like a cushion. A palaki usually had no such cushion. If she was a slave, she could not legally own at all, though in practice she might be trusted with a small purse, a chest, or the keys of storerooms. If she was free or freed, she might hold gifts, clothes, jewelry, a little silver, yet those things could be challenged after a patron died, if heirs felt sharp. The law did not rush to protect her claim the way it guarded a dowry. In a moment, we will place guardianship beside these coins, because it decided who spoke in court. A woman in Athens, whether wife or freedwoman, usually had a male guardian, called a kyrios, who signed contracts and stood in legal matters. For a wife, this was her husband. For an unmarried free woman, a father or other male relative. For a freedwoman, often the former owner or a sponsor. A slave woman had no legal personhood apart from her owner. A palaki could live under any of those umbrellas depending on her status, which means her voice came through another mouth. If she needed to complain of harm or to enforce a promise, the case often arrived in court, carried by the man who owned her, represented her, or had agreed to act as her patron. The path was not impossible, but it bent. In a moment, we will lift one document that tried to make that bend more passable. Manumission, the act of setting a slave free, could be written down with witnesses, sometimes even dedicated before a god at a sanctuary, so that the promise felt sacred and harder to undo. Many cities allowed conditions. A freedwoman might be required to remain with her former owner or his family, to serve in set ways, or to return gifts if she left without consent. In exchange, the document promised maintenance, food, clothing, a room, even burial. The paper could be kind or narrow, but it created a shelf to set small things on, wings, a token of independence, a friend's name as witness. Many historians think such papers mattered most when grief or anger entered the house. In quiet months, trust did most of the work. In a moment, we will look at the question that reached into cradles. What of the children? Children sat where law and love tugged at each other. In Athens, especially after stricter citizenship rules were set in the middle of the classical period, a child needed both a citizen father and a citizen wife's mother to be counted as a citizen. A child born to a palaki who was not a citizen woman could be acknowledged by the father with affection, fed in the same kitchen, taught the same letters, and still be outside the citizen role. Inheritance followed the lines of citizenship and lawful birth. Legitimate sons took the estate. Daughters received dowries. Children born from a palaki might receive gifts, support, or arrangements in a will, but they did not automatically step into the father's shoes. In a moment, we will soften that line with a few paths families used when ties were strong. A father could, in some places and times, adopt a child formally, bring him into the citizen body, or arrange marriages and gifts that made a daughter secure. He might set aside property as a thank you for care in old age, or write instructions that his house maintain a favored child of a palaki, even if the law denied full status. These moves depended on local rules and on the presence or absence of legitimate heirs. They were not guaranteed. Other cities outside Athens were sometimes looser, and later ages under different rulers shifted the boundary posts again. This is why you hear me say it's likely, and many historians think, the law's ink was not the same in every port. In a moment, we will return to safety inside the house, because paper is one kind of shelter, and custom is another. Safety depended on status in quiet, practical ways. If someone injured a citizen wife, a husband could bring a serious charge. If someone seduced her, law named it a grave wrong. If someone harmed a slave woman or a palaki, the wrong was framed differently, as damage to the owner's property or as an offense against the household's peace. This does not mean that harm did not matter. It means the path to remedy ran through someone else's voice. A freedwoman could sometimes bring a case with a sponsor. A slave could not. There were also laws against public insult and assault that could be used when a woman was attacked in the street. But outcomes still leaned on who spoke and who believed whom. In a moment, we will bring the law back to the kitchen and watch how it moved with the day. Inside the house, law lived in small acts. A wife's dowry gave her family leverage. A husband who wasted it might be pressed by her kin. A Palaki-esque security rested more on present favor and on any written promise she could point to. If she ran a shop corner for the household, profits were counted by someone else, even if she kept the books. If she was freed with conditions, each errand touched the paper. How long she must stay, what she must do, whether a festival visit counted as remaining. It sounds dry, but in a world without ID cards or bank accounts, a scrap of papyrus and a handful of witnesses were the difference between being seen and being seen through. In a moment, we will let a soft modern picture hold this idea without strain. Imagine you live in a building where the lease is in someone else's name. You may cook, decorate, and greet the neighbors. The doorman knows your face. But when something breaks, the conversation happens between the landlord and the person on the lease. If your name is also on a side letter, perhaps you paid the deposit. Perhaps you have a promise you sleep a little easier. If not, kindness and routine are your true protection. A Palaki lived under layers much like that. The house could be warm and the days gentle, but the key in the lock belonged elsewhere. In a moment, we will step back into court and let citizenship speak one last time, because it breathed over every cradle. Citizenship in Greek cities was not only a passport, it was a bundle of duties and shares. The citizens stood in assemblies, served on juries, inherited land, and buried parents in family tombs set on public roads. Because those shares were precious, the door into them was guarded. A lawful wife made heirs who were citizens. A Palaki rarely did, unless local law made an exception or the man took extra steps that the city accepted. Even when a father loved all his children, the city loved categories. This gap created workarounds, gifts before death, guardians appointed for favored minors, apprenticeships arranged so a son without citizenship could still learn a trade and stand steady. The law's shadow was long, but families still found patches of sun. In a moment, we will ask what happened when the man who held the papers died. Death rearranged rooms quickly. A wife's dowry could be claimed back by her family, or, if she had sons, it moved forward inside the house with them. A Palaki's place had to be confirmed by heirs or by a will. If she was a slave, heirs decided her future. If she was freed on paper, the conditions spoke. If there was only custom, she needed friends to testify. Some testaments granted maintenance for life, a small house, or the right to keep personal gifts. Others were silent. A change in guardianship could shift everything, especially for children born from a Palaki. Many historians think this is when a neighbor's memory mattered as much as law, who had seen her keep the storerooms, who knew the promise of freedom, who would stand in court to say so. In a moment, we will place one more legal device on the table, and then fold the cloth dot. There was also the simple, strong practice of adoption, used when a man lacked lawful sons or wished to honor someone who had cared for him. Adoption could move adults as well as children into a family line, transfer obligations to 10 graves and gods, and settle property in ways that the usual lines could not. It did not fix every gap for a Palaki or her children, but in some houses it softened the edge of the law's blade. Alongside adoption stood a stack of small, practical papers, receipts, acknowledgements, lists of trousseau items, notes about loans that could act like pebbles on a scale when a judge weighed who had a claim. The picture is not grand, it is detailed. In a moment, we will leave the judge's bench and walk back through the front door to the quiet of daily life. You can feel now how the law set the outer lines of a map and how people found paths within those lines. A wife moved with a dowry's gravity. A Palaki moved with promises, habits, and the goodwill she could grow. A slave woman depended on her owner's will, unless a paper or a god's sanctuary stood between them. A freed woman lived in the in-between, tied by conditions but able to save, to plan, and to ask a sponsor to speak. None of this tells you how bread tasted, or where the loom sat, or when the courtyard cooled at sunset. But it decides who bought the flour, who owned the loom, and who had the right to open the gate at night. In a moment, We will let the legal ink dry and listen for the sounds of a house at work. The frame is built. It is time to color inside it. We will walk across thresholds without hurry and watch a day unfold, the water drawn before dawn, the bread set to rise, the wool teased into thread, the moments of talk between women who shared chores and complicated feelings. We will place the wife and the palaki in the same air and see how distance and kindness traded places across the hours. We will notice where a key hung, which room stayed cooler, and how footsteps grew lighter as night approached. Take one more slow breath. In a moment, we return to the question we opened with. What did an ordinary day feel like? From the inside, when the law had done its part, and the house began to live. Let the house wake in a soft way. Dawn is a grey ribbon over the courtyard wall, and the first sound is not a shout, but the scrape of a jar on stone as someone draws water. The legal frame we built sits quietly in the background now. What breathes in front of us is routine. A wife rises early because bread must begin before the sun climbs. A palaki rises too, unless the household has agreed that her tasks start later. The air smells of yesterday's ash and new dough. Feet move lightly so the night's cool does not flee too soon. In a moment, we will carry that jar into the kitchen and watch the work divide without any speech at all. The kitchen is not a separate palace. It is a corner with fire, pots, and a low bench. A wife who manages the oikos has the keys or the memory for where they hang. She knows which jar holds the fine flour reserved for ritual days and which holds the rough meal for ordinary porridge. A palaki may work beside her, kneading, fetching, cutting, or minding a child on a hip while stirring a pot. The rhythm between them depends on the house. In some rooms it is easy, like two hands shelling peas. In others it is tense, every small gesture watched. Soon we will step into the rooms where cloth grows from fluff to thread and feel how work becomes a language. Weaving sits close to the center of many homes. Wool arrives in tufts. Hands card it, twist it, and feed it to a spindle. The high, patient note of a thread stretching under steady fingers is a sound that never appears in plays, but it fills hours. A wife may oversee what pattern the cloth will take and who will work which loom. A palaki may be the best spinner in the house, or the quickest at fixing snarls, or the one who hums a tune that keeps the shuttles calm. The line between them is not painted on the floor. It is in who gives directions and who obeys. In a moment, the courtyard will call, because water and light live there. Courtyard space belongs to the house like a lung. Herbs bask in pots. A small altar sits against the wall, and washing lines reach like quiet bridges. Work spills into this open room. Laundry, pounding grain, cleaning fish, drying fruit, combing children's hair. Privacy here is not high walls of secrecy. It is gentle. Timing a wife might choose this hour for a small household ritual, pouring a bit of wine and asking for health. A palaki might take the chance to sit in the sun and mend a rip on the quiet side, where eyes do not sting. Soon we will open the front door, just a crack, and look at the edge, where street and home meet. Public and private were not the same for everyone. A wife of a citizen household in Athens might go out less often, or only for funerals, festivals, and visits where kinship reached across thresholds. A palaki who is a slave moves more but belongs to the house. She may carry messages, shop for oil, or escort children to lessons. A freedwoman tied by conditions might also be seen at the market stall if the house runs one. The boundary is therefore a set of choices, not a brick line. Each outing carries a kind of permission slip, spoken or silent. In a moment, we will let lunch arrive and see how the table speaks without words. Midday food is simple, often cold. Bread broken with olives, cheese if fortune smiles, figs when the season allows. The wife takes the place that marks her authority over stores and servants. The palaki sits near if the house is easy, or waits and eats with the other women if form is strict. Children turn this into a living arrangement. They ask questions of whoever answers kindly, and they hand their bowls to whoever seems least rushed. In houses where the wife and the palaki have learned a steady truce, the table is quiet and quick. Where pride is tender, even the placement of a cup can feel like a test. Soon we will go to a room fewer eyes see. Sleeping arrangements say much. Without letters, the wife's chamber is the guarded center of a marriage. A Palaki may sleep in a side room, a small space off a corridor, or near the nursery if there are babies. If she is still enslaved, she may sleep where work lives, ready to rise when a child wakes, or when a pot needs attention. If she is freed, the terms of remaining might give her a room of her own, a small dignity that grows larger each night. The house breathes in these patterns. Who passes whom in the dark? Who is allowed to shut a door? In a moment, we will return to daylight and follow a different rhythms of steps of the wife when the household prays together. Religion is woven into chores. The household might keep a small shrine to the household gods. On certain days the wife leads the domestic rite, because the wife is the public face of legitimate family. The Palaki may help with preparation, clean water, wreaths, a bit of barley, but she may not stand at the center. Yet, at larger festivals, the rules blur. Crowds attend processions, and faces blend. A freed Palaki may slip into a line with neighbors and carry a small tray for offerings, if the city allows. Children tug at hands, and for a few hours the house's inside ranking fades into the city's larger music. Soon we will return to work that pays, because not every hour is cloth and cooking. Money enters quietly. A wife might keep the keys to the chest and record small loans in her head. A Palaki might run a side corner of the family trade, selling dyed thread or bread rolls to passers-by. She may greet regulars by name, and their coins may pass through her fingers before they find the chest inside. This gives her a kind of power that looks small and is not. Familiar faces become allies. A shopkeeper may hold a parcel for her. A neighbor may warn her of a shortage. A fisherman may save the best basket for the house because she asks kindly. Networks sprout in these cracks. In a moment, we will sit with an afternoon when work stalls and feelings speak. Afternoons can be long. Heat pushes people into shade. This is the hour when small conversations grow. A wife may ask a Palaki how the baby is eating, how the weaving will finish, whether the oil merchant cheated. A Palaki may venture a request, a new spindle, a small pot for herself, a visit to a sister in another house. Power hides in who must ask and who can grant. Houses with peace find a rhythm of permission and gratitude that keeps edges smooth. Houses without it turn these moments into contests. The children feel the difference first. They drift toward the person who answers softly. In a moment, we will listen at the door when men's voices return. When the male head of house comes home, the air shifts. A wife manages the welcome in a way that signals her place. Water for washing, a seat, a word about the day's accounts. A Palaki might be nearby, present enough to be seen, careful enough not to challenge the script. Expectations are learned like steps in a slow dance. If the man is kind, the room relaxes. If he is sharp, everyone folds inward. Many historians think a quiet home depended as much on his steadiness as on any paper we looked at earlier. Routine also protects. When each person knows the next move, tempers have fewer places to live. Soon we will step outside again, because the neighborhood is part of the house's weather. Neighbors watch, and not always with malice. Women at wells share advice about prices and remedies. Older men nod at children who run by. Gossip exists, but it often rests on a few familiar tales: a flirt at the market, a husband who drinks, a wife who is proud. A Palaki who moves with grace in public wins small shields against sharp tongues. A wife who treats her fairly earns a reputation for good management. These reputations are practical. They can help when trouble comes, as witnesses or as discreet go-betweens. The street also carries the city's voice. New rules about festivals, rumors of war, attacks due. The house listens with one ear. In a moment, we will let night fall, because days always end. Night brings a cooling and a closing. Lamps burn low, children tumble to pallets, and the house makes a round of small checks, doors, jars, embers. A wife may hold a last quiet moment at the shrine, thanking the household gods for a day without mishap. A Palaki may fold her tools and place them where morning will find them. The legal lines we drew earlier have not vanished, but they dim. What remains in this hour is the sum of tiny choices: who spoke gently, who shared work, who kept a promise. Sleep in such a house feels safe, even if papers say otherwise. In a moment, we will wake again to money and the wider world, because many women in this role did more than keep house. They helped the house earn its bread. You can see now how status shaped every small decision: who walked to the market, who held keys, who led a rite, who spoke at the door end. Yet how daily life kept moving like water around stones. A wife held the formal center, a palaki held a thread that ran through rooms many maps forget. Both could show kindness and both could feel strain, and their fortunes were tied to the man who owned the lease. To use our earlier picture, when we step forward, we will follow coins and ledgers, shops and sidework, gifts and savings tucked away for a careful future. Take one more slow breath. In a moment, we return to the question that has been in the background since the start. How did money widen or narrow the path for a woman who lived as a palaki in ancient Greece? Let the morning open its purse quietly. Coins do not clink loudly in a well-run house. They move like small fish in clear water. We left the women at the end of a long day, folding tools and banking embers. Now we begin earlier, when trade wakes. Money enters a Greek household through many doors: rents from land, pay from a craft, profit from a stall, gifts from kin, interest from a loan, and the slow savings of careful hands. A wife stands where the keys hang. A palaki often stands where the coins actually pass. The difference is subtle until a ledger opens. In a moment, we will set that ledger on the table and watch who writes in it. The simplest picture is a weaving room that also sells cloth. Is not only warmth, it is currency in a gentler form. A household that spins and weaves more than it needs has goods to trade. The wife may choose patterns and arrange bulk orders with kin, but the palaki might run the daily, counting how much thread, how many hours, which girl spins fastest, which loom needs oil. Customers do not always meet the master of the house. They meet the person who smiles, measures, and remembers their size. Many historians think this was a common path to quiet influence, skill with numbers, a fair hand at the scale, and a name that shopkeepers trust. In a moment, we will walk to the stall itself, where shade cloth flaps over the street. Market work is rhythmic. The same fishermen dock at the same hour. The same farmers arrive after sunrise. The same women bring baskets of figs on certain days. In season, a palaki who runs a stall or helps at it learns these tides like a sailor learns wind. She knows when to speak and when to wait, when to discount a threadbare coin and when to accept a nicked one from a widow she likes. She can send a boy to the oilman with confidence. The jar will be filled fairly, because her greeting is remembered. None of this shows up in law codes, yet it feeds a house. In a moment, we will step back behind the stall and see how profit becomes storage, and storage becomes security. Profit, in a modest house, is not a chest of gold. It is a deeper jar of grain, a second amphora of oil, a small string of coins hidden where only trusted hands look. A wife may decide how much to lay by and how much to lend to a cousin. A palaki may know the hiding places and the pace that keeps pantry and purse balanced. If she is enslaved, she cannot own. Yet people often trust a faithful worker with a tiny allowance called a peculium, a private sum that is not fully hers in law, but can be treated as hers in practice. If she is freed with conditions, she may keep gifts outright, especially if witnesses saw them given. The line between mine and ours is a moving thread. Steady accounts, stitch it down. In a moment, we will listen for the sound of a stylus. Writing money down was not only for bankers. Even small traders used memoranda chalk on a wall, lines on a shard of pottery, a scratch on wax to track who owed what until payday. A palaki with neat figures can keep the house honest with itself. When the master asks, "How many cloaks did we send to the ship?" she can answer without delay. When the wife wonders why oil ran out early, the tally tells whether a neighbor borrowed or a jar leaked. This quiet skill protects peace. Numbers are a fence that keeps memory from wandering. In a moment, we will open a door to a different kind of work, the work of hospitality that carries its own coins. Some households offered lodging or food to travelers for pay in rooms set along a courtyard. The wife oversaw cleanliness and linen. The palaki might manage arrivals, set prices, and place guests where they would not disturb children. Hospitality is a kind of soft diplomacy. It requires tone as much as towels. A woman who can greet a stranger from another island without a fence, and end the night with a fair bill as a craft as real as pottery. When festivals swelled the town, these skills mattered, and the purse grew heavier. In a moment, we will stand by a doorway where performance begins, because not all income stayed inside the house. A few women moved nearer the world of entertainers and companions. The line between a household concubine and a hetera was not a hinge that never moved. Some palakai learned music or poetry and were invited out to dinners where wives did not go. If their patron allowed, they could earn gifts of jewelry, fine cloth, or coins from men who admired their company. These earnings did not always become full independence, but they could become leverage, an emergency fund, a pledge returned for a favor, a small dowry for a sister. Many historians think these cases were rare compared with the quiet, inward life of most household companions, yet they show how money travels with reputation. In a moment, we will return to the more common economy, where food itself pays. Payment did not always click. A fisherman's wife might swap a basket of small bream for a length of good thread. A neighbor might trade a day's help at harvest for a cloak. A palaki who manages these exchanges keeps the house knit into a web of favor. When storms come, illness, a death, a tax overdue, these threads pull tight instead of breaking. She will know which neighbor lends a donkey without fuss, and which he expects a loaf with thanks. This social banking belongs to both women in the house, but the one who meets more faces often minds more knots. In a moment, we will hear how money circles back to law, gently but firmly, because coin changes status only if papers keep pace. A freed woman with earnings might ask her patron to witness a purchase in her name, or to allow her to hire a girl under her supervision. A slave woman with a peculium might hope to buy her freedom, slowly, with a price set by the household and sworn before a god. These are long goals. They require patience, good seasons, and the absence of disaster. A ledger that grows by a finger's width each month can still cross a page in a year. The mind that keeps it must be steady. In a moment, we will look at risk, because every trade holds it. Risk lives in broken jars, spoiled fabric, a ship that does not return, a partner who dies, a wife's dowry cushions a fall. A palaki's safety rests more on her ability to restart. A wheel, she might pivot from weaving to bread when wool prices fall, or from bread to dyeing thread when grain is scarce. Flexibility is her best savings account. Many households survived because someone inside could change a plan without breaking it. That someone was often the woman with her hands on the day's business. In a moment, we will let a soft modern image hold this truth. Think of a small family shop today, where one person greets customers, another pays bills, a third bakes. If one worker understands two jobs, the shop survives a sick day. A palaki's worth often lay in that overlap. She could take a child to the physician and still balance the bread accounts by evening. She could notice a new tax at the gate and adjust prices before the men even heard the news in the square. This is not glamorous, it is durable. It is the kind of skill that does not make plays but makes dinners possible. In a moment, we will ask how kindness or cruelty changes the math. Kindness multiplies value. A master who trusts a woman's ledger gives her room to grow a network. A wife who praises fair dealing turns a helper into a true manager. Cruelty erases capital quickly. A shout in the shop empties customers. A public slight from the wife shrinks the authority that keeps prices fair. A broken promise at manumission burns every witness who might have stood for the woman later. Money is not only numbers, it is confidence. A house that protects dignity earns interest it cannot count. In a moment, we will watch how savings become plans. Savings are seeds, and plans are gardens. A palaki with coins of her own, however held, can buy better tools, bribe a porter to watch a door, send a small gift to a midwife, or tuck away a burial fee so she is not thrown on charity if luck turns. If she has children, she can buy a teacher's time or a starter kit for a craft. If she is allowed to hold property in her own name, she might even purchase a tiny room near a temple for later years. Each seed changes the shape of fear. It is not freedom as a song, it is freedom as a quiet breath. In a moment, we will tip our head toward the next lamp on our path, because money touches affection and power, which is where our next steps go. We have kept our eyes on coins and jars, on scales and ledgers, and these have shown how a palaki could matter to a household beyond the bed. Now we must handle the delicate layer that rests on top of everything: intimacy, consent, and the difference between what a poem promises and what safety requires. We will move slowly. The goal will be the same as before. Simplewords.com facts. A respectful tone. For now, you can rest with a smaller imagery, a coin set on a counter, a nod exchanged, a promise kept, and know that in ancient Greek houses, as in many places, quiet competence was its own kind of wealth, saved day by day, until it could be spent on the future. Let the house be quiet again, with only soft sounds moving through it. We have counted coins and watched work. Now we enter the room that asks for the gentlest voice. Intimacy in ancient Greek homes did not float free from status or from law. It sat under the same roof as bread and ledgers, and it obeyed many of the same boundaries. A wife held formal honor. A palaki lived close to the body of the house, but outside the ceremony that made heirs. In kind homes, tenderness could grow in any corner. In unkind ones, power spoke first. In a moment, we will set down the simplest rule that shaped everything else. Who had the right to decide? Consent in that world was tied to status more than to the kind of talk we expect today. A citizen wife was protected by strict custom. A wrong against her counted as a heavy offense against her husband and her family line. A free woman under guardianship had some shield too, even if smaller. A palaki's safety depended on her place in the household, and, if she was freed, on the papers we met earlier, if she was enslaved, her body was under her owner's control. In law, even if affection softened daily life, many historians think this difference paper versus person explains why poetry could dream loudly while real women measured their steps. In a moment, we will set the city's rule about adultery on the table and listen to its shape. In Athens and some other cities, adultery was defined quite narrowly. It meant sex with a citizen woman, under the protection of a kyrios, usually a wife, and it was treated as a serious offense. A husband could bring a case, and in some periods there were sharp penalties, even the right to take violent action if he caught the pair in the act. Sex with a slave woman or a foreign woman did not fall under the same heading. The law framed those cases as property matters, or as lesser wrongs. This sounds cold, because it is. The city's main worry was the purity of citizen birth and inheritance. A palaki who was not a citizen wife could be cherished in the kitchen and still stand outside this legal fence. Soon we will soothe this hard line with the quieter truth of ordinary rooms. Daily affection often ignored the city's narrow definitions. A man could be fond of a palaki, consult her, ask after her comfort, bring a gift without ceremony. She could fold a cloak over his shoulders when he returned late and tired. He might trust her to care for him during illness, when the house's strength rested in quiet hands. These moments did not change status, but they changed temperature. Many historians think such private warmth was common because houses last longer on kindness than on rules. Still, the balance was unequal, and the person with the keys decided when an hour ended. In a moment, we will bring the poets and the drinking parties in because they created the pictures many later readers remember. Symposium talk and love poems painted love as a game of wit and chase. A famous courtesan might appear as a clever match for clever men. A song might praise a glance or a doorway meeting. That stage light falls most often on hetairai, who sometimes chose their company and set their price. A household palaki rarely stood in that spotlight. Her world was less wine and more water jar, less lyre and more ledger. When comedy shows a jealous wife and a teasing mistress, it is making types for laughter, not reporting an exact house. Real nights were quieter, to people who had worked all day, whose future hung on a will, speaking in low voices about a child's cough or a coming tax. In a moment, the city's expectations about men and women will lean over the scene, and we will notice the angle. Men in many Greek cities could move more freely in public, and custom allowed them sexual access to enslaved women without the same social storm that would follow adultery with a citizen wife. Wives were expected to be modest and guarded, their honor carrying the future of names and property. A palaki stood between these poles. She could be visible to the household and known to the neighbors. She could not demand the public honors of a bride, nor could she count on public outrage if harmed. That is why money and documents mattered so much in the last part of our walk. They gave weight to a voice that custom kept lighter. In a moment, we will glance toward shrines, because belief softened and shaped desire at the edges. Religion did not make one map of love. It made many small paths. Households honored Hestia for the hearth, Artemis for safe births, Aphrodite for love's sweetness, and local gods for local needs. Offerings were quiet: a garland, a cake, a vow tied with wool. A wife led certain home rites because, in the city's eyes, she carried the family line. A palanquin could still pray, still set a sprig on a doorway, still whisper a request for gentleness or for a child's health. Some festivals winked at desire, some warned against excess. Many historians think belief worked like water around stones. It did not erase hierarchy, but it flowed through it, giving people words for hope and thanks. In a moment, we will return to the private room, where two people share a bed and speak. Without witnesses. Power dynamics followed us into that room. A woman who depended on one man for shelter, status, and freedom learned the weather of his moods. Some men managed their house like a craft, steady, predictable, safe. Others were rough or careless. Safety grew from habits: no drinking to anger, no hands raised, promises kept hand from the women's small strategies. A wife might step in to cool tempers. A palanquin might choose the time to ask a favor with skill, born of practice. None of this is glamorous, all of it is real. You can feel the echo of our earlier analogy about a lease. Comfort is true until the key turns. Soon we will set one last bright mask beside this plain scene and let you decide how it fits. Classical art often shows Aphrodite serene and flawless, Eros with wings, couples lounging on couches at a feast. Those images are like a festival poster on a busy street, catching, aspirational, a thin slice of life. The rest of the year looks different. A palanquin's intimacy included fetching water after folding clothes, checking a toddler's blanket, and waking at dawn to bake. It included care during sickness, which is a kind of love that poetry mentions but does not dwell on. If respect lived in the room, intimacy could be a warm rest after long work. If respect did not live there, the quiet could feel narrow. In a moment, we will take the smallest turn of all, from 2 people to 3, because intimacy, in many houses, led to children, and children changed every rule without changing the law's words. A woman who became a mother-wife or palanquin gained a new center around which her day turned. Milk, names, amulets against fear, first shoes, first letters, these belonged to her hands. The city still watched lines of status, but the baby did not. The baby reached for the voice that soothed best. The house followed that reach more often than plays admit. In a moment, we will carry the infant to the courtyard and watch the naming, the feeding, and the plans that rose like steam from a warm bath. Before we go, it is fair to ask how consent looked inside such bonds. Many historians think the word itself is hard to apply, where law did not imagine equal partners. Yet people still found ways to say yes and no, to set rhythms, to choose kindness when they could. A woman might refuse a request when she was ill without punishment in a good house. She might negotiate time and attention, using her skill at work and the affection she earned. None of this fixes the asymmetry. It only recognizes human room inside it. The strongest proof is that households lasted. They do not last on fear alone. They last on routine, on shared humor, on a hand that knows when to bring water. In a moment, we will step into motherhood, where love and law tug in new directions. We have held this lamp as steadily as we can. We named the city's worries about adultery and heirs. We noticed how poems and parties made bright pictures, and how ordinary beds were quieter. We watched power move with keys and papers, and we let belief add a softer color around the edges. Now the scene widens. A baby cries. A child laughs from behind a pillar. A woman, wife, or palanquin rocks, feeds, soothes, and plans. Our next steps will be slow and practical. What names meant, how nursing worked, what the city allowed, what families did anyway, and how a mother built a future even when the law did not give her child the finest seat at the table. Take one more easy breath. In a moment, we return to the question we opened with. What did a day feel like? from the cradle outward. When a household love had to live within the city's lines, let the room be dim and kind while a small life begins to breathe. A baby's cry is high and sudden at first, then it settles to a soft rhythm. The house answers with warm water, clean cloth, and hands that already know what to do. A wife may lead the first steps because ritual sits beside duty, but a Palaki often holds the baby through the long, plain hours when ritual sleeps. Milk quiets the world for both of them. In a moment, we will follow that milk to the quiet. Rules around names and belonging, because love arrives before law. And then law catches up. Feeding in ancient Greek homes could be the mother's breast, a wet nurse hired for help, or a careful mix one woman's milk at night, another's. During busy days, if the Palaki was enslaved, her time was not entirely her own. Yet many houses understood that a nursing body sets the household's clock. Work slowed to match the infant's need, and other women covered tasks. Even a stern master learned to step quietly when a child had just fallen asleep. The city had little to say about these moments. It spoke louder at the threshold of the naming day. In a moment, we will carry the baby to the courtyard, where words make a circle around a life. Names arrived with small ceremonies. Families in many cities held a feast a few days after birth, calling kin and friends to see the baby and to hear the chosen name. A wife's child in lawful marriage gained a place in the family story that stretched backward through graves and forward into inheritance. A child of a Palaki might be welcomed warmly in the same kitchen, kissed by the same hands, yet the city's role of citizens did not always open for him or her. The difference lived in ledgers and in future doors, not in the sound of the name itself. Soon we will watch how mothers worked with and around that difference. A mother is a planner by instinct. She counts swaddling cloths and days of fever. She also counts possible futures. If her child will not be a citizen under strict rules, she still plots a good road, a craft to learn, a patron to please, a marriage to arrange with gifts she can save. She chooses godparents and witnesses carefully, because one day their memory may firm up a promise written in a will. Even small things become tools: a copper coin kept for the midwife's kindness, a jar of oil traded for a winter cloak, a neighbor's word saved like a seed. In a moment, we will sit through the fragile weeks when babies must pass a narrow gate and mothers keep watch. Infancy has risks in any age. Fevers come without warning. Colic can make nights long. A cough lingers after rain. Women in the house share remedies learned from mothers and midwives: honeyed water, warm compresses, charms tied loosely for comfort, more than for magic. A Palaki who is also a slave may carry her own child and another's to the sun at the same hour, steadying both. A freed woman might spend her small savings on a physician's visit, counting the coin twice before she lets it go. Many historians think neighbors mattered as much as doctors in these weeks. Women who could sit, rock, and give advice the way a song gives breath. In a moment, we will watch the child grow enough to stand and feel how the house rearranges its edges. When a child begins to walk, the oikos becomes an obstacle course of love. Loom weights must be moved higher, the hearth guarded, the courtyard swept of anything sharp. A wife, responsible for order, may set new rules: no play near the fire, no running with cups. A Palaki responsible for daily care turns those rules into games. The child learns to carry a tiny jug of water, to touch the shrine respectfully, to bring father his sandals with pride. In the city's eyes, these acts are small. In the child's day, they are the first steps into belonging. Soon we will open the door a little wider and see who else teaches. Boys might be sent to a small teacher to learn letters and numbers. Girls often learned house skills first, and letters if fortune smiled. A Palaki could be the first teacher either way. She turns a grocery list into reading practice, a sale at the stall into addition, a length of thread into a ruler. If the father supports it, a child outside the citizen role can still learn as much as any neighbor. Skill is not stamped at birth. A mother measures carefully which talents will travel farthest under the law that exists. Music may earn favors. Neat handwriting may earn wages. A polite greeting may open doors that logic alone cannot. In a moment, we will ask how love and law talk when the child asks hard questions. Children sense difference before they can name it. A boy may notice that his cousin walks into a festival choir while he watches from the crowd. A girl may notice that her friend's dowry chest grows bigger while hers is still a plan. Mothers answer softly and honestly for their time. Our house has its way, and the city has its rules. We will make your way strong inside those lines. A wife can name proud ancestors, a palaki can name proud skills. Both can teach dignity that does not depend on a role of citizens. The lesson is simple. You are loved here, and you will be useful there. Soon we will watch how play in the courtyard becomes practice for the world beyond the gate. Play imitates work. Children sell pretend figs to each other, count pebbles like coins, spin a toy top on the smoothest patch of floor. A mother uses these games to test character. Does the child cheat, share, persist, laugh? A palaki will spot the child who loves the loom, and the one who cannot sit still but can carry messages without getting lost. She will whisper suggestions to the wife about which cousin could teach a craft, which neighbor might take an apprentice. These little nudges are how a non-citizen child finds a straight path through a crooked city. Many historians think this quiet steering mattered more than great speeches. In a moment, the father enters again, and we hear the different voices of love. Fathers could be tender or distant, permissive or strict, but their choices weighed heavily. A father might acknowledge a child of a palaki openly, arrange training, give gifts in life instead of only in a will, and ask friends to watch over the child if misfortune came. He might also hesitate, pulled by the claims of lawful heirs, or by fear of gossip. A mother learns to read those winds. She asks for what the child needs at the right time, not all at once. A cloak in winter, a place at a tutor's stool, a letter of introduction to a craftsman. Step by step the child's ladder rises. In a moment, we will follow that ladder to the point where a young person tries a first task outside. First tasks are small stakes with long shadows. A boy carries a message to the harbor and returns on time. A girl takes bread to a buyer and keeps the count exact. A pair of hands helps sort wool in a neighbor's workroom without complaint. Praise from outside the house is currency inside it. A palaki who has built good standing in the market spends a little of that credit on her child's future. He is the son who fetches water for me, the shopkeeper says fondly. She minds her sums. The weaver adds. These sentences become invisible letters of recommendation. They are not stamped, but they stick. In a moment, we will step through a darker doorway, because not every plan survives. Loss was real. A baby might not live past a fever. A father might die and leave promises uneven. Jealousy might stir among heirs. A mother prepared for these shadows by widening her child's circle. Godparents, patrons, neighbors, the temple where the child once carried flowers. She saved tokens that could prove a gift was meant to be kept. A piece of cloth with a seal, a small note with a name, a witness who remembered. If adoption offered a path, she learned its terms. If it did not, she built resilience and skills. And friends, none of this cancels sorrow. It gives sorrow a path to walk. In a moment, we will lift our eyes from this single house to the wider town. Because a child's life soon meets the crowd's gaze. Festivals, markets, and theater taught children the city's face. A child learned when to cheer, when to be quiet, how to stand in line at a fountain, how to carry himself in a procession if allowed, or how to watch without sulking if not. A mother watched the watchers, what neighbors praised, what they frowned. A hand adjusted her child's steps toward acceptance, not to erase difference but to make space for dignity. A palaki who had earned the market's trust could lend that trust to her child. A wife who was respected for order could protect both children's names. Together they wrote a softer ending to the city's hard sentences. Soon we will linger in that public space where gossip and jokes can bruise or bless, and where a woman living as a palaki walks carefully to keep her head high. You can feel how motherhood bends the lines we drew earlier. The city still guards citizenship as a treasure. The house still runs on keys and papers. Yet day by day, a mother-wife or palaki turns meals into growth, errands into lessons, and names into a kind of armor. Love and law do not match, but they learn to walk together without tripping. The next steps will take us into the wider town, where neighbors, festivals, markets, and theater shape reputations. There we will watch how a woman manages the gaze of others, finds kindness among jokes, and keeps her household's dignity in a world that loves simple stories. For now, let the child sleep, the lamp burn low, and the plans rest in a neat stack at the edge of the bed. Let the door open to the street with a small sigh, and feel how the air changes. Inside, the house was a pattern of bread, cloth, and cradles. Outside, the city is a pattern of eyes. Stones remember footsteps. Vendors warm their voices. A woman who lives as a Palaki in ancient Greece steps into this space knowing that every errand can also be a performance. She keeps her basket light enough to carry and her gaze steady enough to pass. The market does not ask for papers first, it asks for presence. In a moment, we will stand by a fountain and learn how water teaches the rules without speaking. Public wells and fountains are social clocks. People arrive at predictable hours, and news moves with the water. A wife might send a servant, but a Palaki often comes herself, especially if she manages cooking or trade. She greets familiar faces, returns a borrowed jug, and learns which ship docked in the night. The ritual is simple: rinse, fill, step back. What changes is how long she lingers. Too long invites talk, too short misses chances. Many historians think these small choices built a woman's public safety net, neighbors who would speak up later when truth needed help. Soon we will follow her to the stalls, where coins, glances, and jokes mingle in the same shade. The market is always part theater. Sellers praise figs as if they were royal gifts, and fishmongers describe the morning's catch like poets. Comedy, lives between prices. A woman who is a Palaki receives jokes that try to place her closer to servant, closer to wife, closer to courtesan, because the crowd likes tidy shelves. She answers with the soft skill of not giving more than needed. How much for oil? The same as yesterday, unless your jar has grown bigger. The line is gentle. It draws a laugh that ends the guessing. In a moment, we will turn a corner and hear the louder, official theater that taught whole cities what a type looked like. Public plays use masks. The mask for the jealous wife has one fixed frown. The mask for the clever courtesan has a raised eyebrow. The mask for the busy made a quick smile. Audiences learn these faces without effort. After the festival, those masks walk home in people's heads and stand beside real women at the fountain. A Palaki must sometimes peel a mask away with simple, consistent acts. Fair weight on the scale. A clean stall, a quiet word in a quarrel. She cannot argue with a mask. She can outlast it. Soon we will step into a festival crowd and notice how rules loosen and tighten at once. Festivals change streets into braided rivers. Processions carry offerings to temples. Musicians keep time. Some festivals are open to all. Some, like certain women's rights, ask men to stand back. A wife in good standing might join a queue with her kin, carry a tray, or watch a relative hand a woven gown to a sacred statue. A Palaki's place depends on status and local custom. If she is enslaved, she might follow at a practical distance, carrying water and cloth. If she is freed, she may join neighbors on the edge of the route, singing the same refrains, eyes bright with the same pride. The city does not erase feeling, it arranges it. In a moment, we will step aside from drums to a quieter lane where errands teach the same lesson more softly. Errands weave reputations. A baker sets aside yesterday's bread at a discount. A physician greets a child by name. A spice seller warns of a false measure at a rival's stall. These small privileges fall to the person the neighborhood trusts. A Palaki who has proved reliable becomes that person. She pays on time, returns what she borrows, and does not turn whispers into storms. The market remembers. When later she needs a witness to say, yes, the master promised her that. It helps if the witness is a fishmonger who has seen her for 10 years and thinks of her as steady. Soon we will look at clothing, because fabric speaks before words. Dress is a quiet language. A wife in a citizen household might favor modest layers that signal order and respect. A Palaki may wear similar cloth if the house provides it, or plainer gear if money is tight. Very bright jewels invite guessing. Very poor shoes invite pity. She chooses the middle path, clean, neat, not loud. A thin veil can be more than shade. It is a way to edit how much of the face the street gets to keep. Many historians think posture was the loudest clothing of Olchin-level steps even. baskets balanced with no fuss. In a moment, we will glance at places a woman might avoid, because dignity sometimes means choosing the long way home. Some corners are rough at certain hours, the street by the wine shops at night, the lane near the wrestling ground after contests, the tight knot of men debating at the barber. A Palaki maps her city like water maps a valley. She flows where the slope is kind and waits where it is not. If she must pass, she times the crossing for a busy moment, when sharp eyes are busy elsewhere. This is not fear, it is craft. A city belongs to those who learn its safer rhythms. Soon we will return to the chorus of voices that set those rhythms, the neighbors whose talk can bruise or bless. Gossip feels like weather. It blows in, lingers, and moves on. A Palaki cannot stop the wind, but she can make sure her shutters are in good repair. She gives nothing to the street that the house has not already agreed to share. She knows which friend repeats stories and which friend swallows them. She recognizes the kind man who teases to be friendly and the mean one who teases to tally. Power. When a joke bites, she lets silence stand until it looks foolish on its own. The market appreciates self-control as much as clever lines. In a moment, we will join the wife on a rare shared outing and see how the two women walk together without tripping each other. There are days when the house needs two sets of hands outside, a large purchase, a festival preparation, a visit to a shrine after illness. The wife walks first because custom asks it. The Palaki walks beside or a little behind, matching pace, carrying the list, holding the jar. If their households are peaceful, the sight sends a message. This home is in order. If there is tension, the same sight invites stares that try to read a quarrel into every silence. The best reply is an ordinary errand done well. People remember finished tasks more than imagined drama. Soon we will step across the city line to a road where travelers appear. Because strangers often see clearly what locals take for granted. Travelers bring different eyes. A woman from another island may tie her hair another way. A merchant from a distant port may treat a Palaki with the courtesy that surprises neighbors. New manners slip into town like new spices, and a practical woman learns what is useful. If a polite greeting in one dialect gets faster service at the granary, she keeps it. If a visiting physician shares a remedy, she remembers it. The city grows by such borrowings, and a household grows with it. In a moment, we will turn back toward the threshold and look at dignity as a slow craft rather than a sudden prize. Dignity is not a crown. It is a practice. It is keeping accounts exact, returning the wrong coin with a smile, standing aside to let an elder pass, and treating a rival's apprentice kindly in public. It is refusing to turn private pain into a market scene. Over months and years, this practice settles on a person like a second garment. When trouble comes and in any city, it does the garment holds. Neighbors speak, a magistrate listens, a shopkeeper steps forward. Many historians think this quiet capital mattered as much as silver. In a moment, we will let the theater re-enter for one final bow, and then leave it behind. At the big festivals, the city laughs at itself. Comedy makes a clumsy husband, a strict wife, a scheming hetaira, a dreamy youth, and a scolding slave. The masks nod to types that everyone recognizes, which is why the laughter flows. Then the masks come off, and the real city puts its sandals back on. Walking home, a Palaki may feel the echo of a line that was too sharp. She answers it the next morning not with a speech, but with work-affair scale. A kind word, a clean stall, plays fade, patterns remain. Soon we will draw the street's light inward again, because every public path eventually turns toward endings and turns inside the house. We have watched a woman carry herself in the city's gaze at fountains, stalls, shrines, and stages. We have seen how jokes try to place her, and how steady habits lift her out of boxes. We have noticed how dress, route, timing, and tone shape, safety. Now the day grows long in another sense. What happens when age arrives, when a man dies, when savings have a chance to become freedom, or when promises must be tested by paper? The crowd's eyes fade, and the lawyer's eyes grow sharper. Take a slow breath. In a moment, we will step back inside and trace the endings and turns manumission sealed. Rooms reassigned, old age made, gentle or hard, and we will carry into that room the dignity the market taught us. because it is often the best witness a woman has. Let the door close softly behind us, and feel the house take back its shape. The market's eyes fade. The ledger sits where it always sits. We are going to follow the quiet turns of a life, the papers signed, the savings counted, the rooms reassigned when age arrives or a patron dies. These turns decide whether a woman who lived as a Palaki ends her days in familiar light or in a room that feels borrowed. We will move slowly and read each corner as if it were a small inscription. In a moment, we will set the first stone. In place, the promise of manumission that has waited like a folded letter in a jar. Manumission could be a ceremony as simple as witnesses gathered at a doorway, or as solemn as a dedication before a god at a sanctuary. A patron declared, in front of names that could be remembered later, that a woman was now free. Often the promise carried strings, the paramount we met earlier, which asked her to remain in the household, serve in set ways, and accept the house's protection in return. Freedom in this shape was not a bird flying into the sky. It was a bird with a silk thread still tied to its leg. Yet even a thread can be cut in time. The paper mattered most when grief or dispute entered the room, because ink speaks after tempers cool. In a moment, we will see how a will could either keep that thread kind or tug it tight. Wills turned private promises into public instructions. A careful man who wished to protect a Palaki might grant her maintenance for life, food, clothing, a small room, or give her property outright, naming witnesses who knew the truth of the bond. He might free her fully at his death, striking the paramount away with one sentence. He might make provisions for children born to her, a sum for a son's training, a dowry for a daughter, a guardian to watch until they could stand alone. But a will could also be silent, leaving the woman to the mercy of heirs who saw only their own shares. This is why savings and reputation in the market mattered. They became a second voice when the testaments were thin. Soon we will watch what heirs do, because endings are never only paper. Heirs arrive with keys and questions. They count jars and lambs, read lists, and weigh obligations they had not expected. In a kind household, they keep promises because they value their father's word and the house's peace. In a sharper house, they look for places to trim. A freed Palaki with witnesses in good standing can remind them gently that the city is watching too. A slave Palaki without papers may find herself shifted like furniture. Many historians think the difference between sorrow and disaster often rested on two small supports. A scrap of writing that someone had the sense to keep flat and dry, and neighbors willing to say, "We heard him promise." In a moment, we will look at old age itself, because even good papers do not cook porridge. Old age changed the pace of a day. Fingers that once flew over thread now move like small boats through thick water. Knees that bent easily at the loom protest each step in houses with steadiness. An older Palaki slid into roles that honored memory, telling stories to children, minding accounts from a stool, sorting tools, blessing small triumphs. In houses without steadiness, age made a woman invisible. The best protection against that vanishing act was usefulness that could be offered sitting down, and the savings tucked away when hands were still quick. In a moment, we will open that small purse and count what it can buy. Savings was seldom grand. There were strings of coins, a bit of jewelry, a jar of oil, a tiny share in a stall, or the right to rent a corner room near a temple where the old sit in the sun. With such pieces, a woman could pay for a physician once, buy warmer cloth for winter, bribe a porter to carry a heavy jar, or give a thank you to a neighbor who watched her child while she worked. If a will granted a stipend, the coins met the purse, and the purse breathed easier. If it did not, the habit of exchange favors banked over years could still keep soup on the hearth. It sounds small because it was small, yet small is how most lives stay warm. In a moment, we will test the beam we built long ago, the paramount that promised shelter in exchange for service. Remaining with a household could be protection or a snare, depending on who now held the master key. If heirs respected the old terms, the woman kept her room, her place at the work table, and her seat by the courtyard wall on sweet evenings. If they tightened the rope, she did what she had done all her life, negotiated with skill. She offered what she could still do well, asked for what she truly needed, and presented the paper with calm hands when memory failed others. Sometimes a magistrate weighed the words and sided with her. Sometimes he did not. This is why dignity, the slow craft we learned outside, became a last savings account. Officials listen better to a name the market respects. In a moment, we will open a gentler door, because not all endings were bound to one house. A few stories turned in brighter ways. A patron who had never married, or who had no heirs ready to inherit, sometimes chose to formalize what had long been true. He married a woman who had been his palaki, and made her the lawful lady of the house. This was rare and depended on local laws, on his status, and on whether powerful kin frowned. Yet it happened often enough to live in more than rumor. More common was the pathway where a freedwoman used her savings to move out to a small room of her own, perhaps joining a cluster of other freed people near a sanctuary where records of manumission were kept. Their old friends could be found, and small help secured without asking the very family whose grief was still raw. Soon we will step into the temple's shade, because stones sometimes keep promises better than men. Sanctuaries that recorded manumissions acted like gentle banks of memory. A line cut into stone, so-and-so freed so-and-so before the god, gave a freed person a place to stand if questions arose. Priests and regular worshippers became a kind of community archive. A woman who needed help could wait by the steps. For someone who remembered names and days, temples also offered shelter in a softer sense familiar faces. A bench where old news became new advice. A corner where the lonely were less alone. These places were not safety nets woven by law, but they were knots in the civic fabric that held even when the city's big drums were silent. In a moment, we will return to the house for a darker scenario, because truth asks it. When a patron died suddenly without a will, or when heirs were hostile, a palaki who was still enslaved could be sold. It is a sentence we speak in a low voice because it is heavy. Women planned against that cliff by building friendships outside the main branch of the family shopkeepers, scribes, midwives, other freed people. A neighbor with a little money might buy her and free her in front of the same god, putting a new name on a new paper. Kindness like this did not rain often, but it fell sometimes, especially where a woman had paid kindness forward for years. That knowledge turned daily politeness into strategy. In a moment, we will let the law of adoption reappear, because it could change hard edges into round ones. Adoption, especially of grown sons, gave childless men a way to settle property and duties. A patron who loved a child born to a palaki could adopt him, placing him in the citizen line and smoothing the way for his mother, too, perhaps not by name, but by the privileges that attach to a son who now has standing. A daughter might be portioned with a dowry, her mother thanked in gifts and maintenance. Adoption did not erase old hierarchies, but it made bridges across them. You can hear a faint echo of our market lessons here. When a city values names on lists, the surest kindness is sometimes to rewrite the list. Soon we will ask how bodies aged inside these papers, because the hands that folded cloth once have. To rest. Age brought softness to some duties and weight to others. An older woman might be excused from the heavy jars and the morning bread, but invited to keep the little chest of receipts and to speak first when disputes broke out in the courtyard. She became a memory holder, a living ledger, who remembered why a pair of sisters had not spoken last spring and how they made peace at midsummer. In a house that honored her, this role felt like a crown woven from ordinary days. In a house that did not, she clung to what we have named again and again: a few coins, a paper, and a network of names that answered when she called. In a moment, we will step outside the city wall because some endings wanted quiet. Burial mattered because it answered the final question: who claims you? A wife usually lay in the family plot, marked by her husband's name. Her dowry safely turned into memorial duty for her sons. A palaki's resting place depended on love and paper. A generous will might provide a modest stone cut with her own name. A temple might allow a small marker for a freedwoman who lived near and kept its steps clean. Even when no stone was cut, memory stones were laid in other minds, children she had soothed, neighbors she had served, small debts of kindness that did not vanish with smoke. That is not a legal ending, but it is a human one. In a moment, we will bring our eyes back to the living, because turns also mean fresh starts. For some women, the end of one tie opened a new shape of life. A freedwoman with craft could join a circle of widows and older tradeswomen who pooled rent, watched each other's doors, and kept a shared box of emergency coins. A woman with a grown child employed by a guild could move near that child and trade chores for food and shelter. A woman with a clever hand at medicines might become the person neighbors called in the night, before the physician could be found. These are small powers, but they steady the last years. They also remind us that status at 20 is not destiny at 60. In a moment, we will let a modern image settle the thought. Think of a boat leaving harbor. A wife's ship sails with a name carved in paint and a cargo insured by family. A Palakies launches under another flag, with fewer papers, watching the weather closer. Both can reach quiet coves, and both can meet storms. The difference is not in the sea, it is in the margin for error. Savings are extra oars, witnesses are patch kits. Dignity is a sail that catches small, reliable winds. With these, a woman can still make land, even if her map never showed a clear harbor. Soon we will lift our head from this single city and look along the coast, because other harbors drew different lines on the same sea dot. Our next steps will widen the view. We will glance at how Sparta, Ionia, and other Greek communities handled these roles, and how later Hellenistic courts and Roman rules shifted terms and doors. You will see similarities: property guarded, names cherished, and differences: women seen more in public here, fewer papers there. We will end by noting what we cannot know without pretending certainty that the stones and the jokes do not give us. For now, let the room grow quiet again. The ledger is closed. The papers are folded. The woman we have followed has found a chair, in the shade, and her hands, resting at last, still know where the keys once hung. In a moment, we will open the window and let a sea breeze bring us to other towns with the same sun and different rules. Open the window and let the breeze widen our map. We have stood mostly in an Athenian doorway because so many surviving words come from that city. But the Greek world was a coastline of many coves, and each cove kept its own rules. If you picture our wardrobe of term's wife, Palaki, dual, the same garments were worn differently from town to town. The cloth sometimes changed color, the seams fell in new places, and a woman's path bent with local habits. We will move softly along the shore now, stopping where customs shifted the weight of a day. In a moment, we will step into Sparta, where the air feels oddly wide and spare. Sparta trained citizen men for war, and its citizen women for strength and public presence, in ways that made outsiders talk. Wives there managed land more openly when husbands were away for long stretches, and they moved in public with a confidence rare elsewhere. That does not mean every woman had power. Most of the work of the city rested on people without citizenship, including the helots who farmed under harsh control. As for a Palaki in the Athenian sense, the picture blurs. The strictness of Spartan marriage ideals left less stage for a household concubine to be acknowledged in the same way. If such bonds existed, they hid more in the shade, and the sources are quiet. In a moment, we will sail east to Ionia, where harbors made life feel more like a marketplace of tongues. The cities of Ionia, busy ports along Asia's shore, lived with ships arriving daily and ideas arriving with them. Households breathed a more cosmopolitan air. Goods, fashions, and songs mixed. In towns like Miletus or Ephesus, people spoke of household partners much as in Athens, but the lanes echoed with more foreign accents, and that softened borders a little. A Palaki might be more likely to have been born somewhere else, and manumission might be recorded at a sanctuary crowded with travelers from many cities. The line between household partner and public entertainer could shift with money and taste, especially where patrons from many regions dined under one roof. Markets teach people to bargain. They also teach them to accept a wider range of arrangements. Soon we will glance at places famous for performance, because reputation has a home address too. Corinth, with its twin ports, had a lively trade in wit and work. Writers loved to attach sparkle to its name, and later periods painted its courtesans with a gilded brush. A household Palaki there might live nearer the glitter than her sister in a quieter inland town. Yet most lives still returned to bread, cloth, and jars. The crowds simply made it easier to slip off the mask of type and be one more face in a busy street. When people come and go, the city's eyes tire of guessing, A steady stall and a reliable scale carry more weight than a label. In a moment, we will follow kings. Because after the classical cities came royal courts, where the wardrobe changed again. Hellenistic courts, after Alexander set new stages. Palaces with many rooms, scribes in long corridors, and large households, managed like small cities. Here, the language of concubinage rose and fell with royal fashion. A king might have a queen, and also keep recognized companions who were not queens. Some became powerful, especially if they bore sons, and their names reached us because kingdoms hung on cradles. The palace version of a palaki was grander in surroundings and sharper in danger. The rewards could be white gifts, estates, influence, and the risks could be final, because court politics used hard tools. This does not map neatly onto the small houses we have known, yet it rhymes. Papers matter, witnesses matter, and the difference between a warm room and a cold one can be one sentence in a will. In a moment, we will step into Egypt, where scribes left us more paper than most places did, under the Ptolemies and later under Rome. Egypt produced contracts on papyrus that let us watch people in a way stone rarely permits. We see manumissions with conditions, loans to freedwomen, maintenance agreements, and rare hints of household partners recorded with practical terms. Some documents use Greek, some use Egyptian forms, many mix. A woman who lived as a concubine might appear as a named party in a lease or as a witness to a sale, especially if she was freed and trading on her own small account. These glimpses say less about romance and more about reach. If you can sign, you can anchor your day. If you can collect a debt with a sponsor standing by, you can plan a winter better. In a moment, we will cross into Roman law, because Rome changed the legal weather even when roofs stayed. Greek-Roman rule brought a bundle of words that altered household arrangements. Roman law recognized a form of long-term partnership outside formal marriage called concubinatus, respectable in some settings when both partners were free to marry but chose not to, and more common when differences of rank made marriage difficult. It also named contubinium, for unions between enslaved persons, a word that admitted a bond without granting it power in court. In the eastern cities that kept Greek ways under Roman umbrellas, these terms mixed with older habits. Many historians think the Roman categories gave some women a clearer place on paper, even if the old asymmetries remained. A promise written under a new name can still keep rain off a familiar floor. Soon we will look inland, because not all differences were made by empires. Some were made by mountains. Mountain towns in mainland Greece and islands off the major routes kept older rhythms longer. Fewer public records survive, and so we must let small clues do large work. Grave markers with simple names, dedications at rural shrines, court speeches copied in larger cities that mention someone from the hills. It is likely that a Palaki's day in such places looked more like our Athenian sketch, and less like the courtly version. More weaving than law, more barter than ledgers. Local custom is hard to see because custom rarely writes itself down. That is why we have kept saying it's likely, and many historians think silence is not consent to any story. It is just silence. In a moment, we will name our shelves of evidence and their limits with care. Most of our knowledge comes from men who had reason to speak, orators persuading juries, comic poets who loved neat types, philosophers drawing tidy maps of ideal households, inscriptions that praised donors, and, in Egypt, scribes who recorded transactions in a climate kind to papyrus. The lives of women who were palaki appear when a line of law or a line of poetry needs them to stand still. That means our view is tilted. We try to counter the tilt by watching kitchens, looms, fountains, and stalls, places where no one writes but everyone lives. We also used soft analogies, like the lease and the wardrobe, so you could hold shapes without needing a scholar's glossary. If you listen back through the night, you'll hear the same rhythm. Law sets frames, people color inside them. In a moment, we will let the frames fade and the people remain. Across cities and centuries, 3 quiet tools kept reappearing: paper where possible, savings were allowed, and dignity where nothing else could be counted. Papers could be a manumission inscription, a clause to remain, a will, a list of gifts, an adoption, or, later, a Roman-style acknowledgement. Savings could be coin, cloth, or favors banked with neighbors. Dignity was the slow practice we met in the market, the fair scale, the steady voice, the refusal to turn pain into a scene. Together they formed the life jacket many women wore without ever leaving shore. In our earlier rooms, legal, domestic, public, we saw how each tool did its work. Now we thread them through all these places: Sparta, Ionia, Corinth, Egypt, Rome. And notice how much sameness lives beneath the differences. In a moment, we will return to the first lamp we lit at the very beginning. We began by correcting our time. This story was not medieval Europe, but the older Greek world. We then asked what a concubine meant there, and we learned to say palaki with care, setting it near wife Hetaira, and duel, without letting the words melt together. We watched doors open: war, poverty, manumission, affection, and we watched law sort the children and the property with a narrow eye. We smelled bread, heard the loom, counted coins, and kept our voice low in a room where consent bends with status. We carried a baby to a naming, smiled carefully at the market, and sat with endings written in a slow hand. Each stop has been a return to the same question: what did life really look like, in the light of small acts, when a woman lived as a In a moment, we will give that question one last answer you can carry lightly. It looked like a long practice of making rooms livable within lines you could not erase. It looked like planning in cups and jars. Kindness turned into reputation, and reputation turned into help when papers failed. It looked like mothers teaching skills that moved through any city, like a wife and a palaki, sharing work when peace allowed, like a patron who could make a day gentle with one fair sentence. It looked different in Sparta's dry light, and in Ionia's busy harbors. It took on palace shine in Hellenistic courts, and new labels under Rome. Yet the daily breath was the same: draw water, keep accounts, soothe a child, time a request, fold a promise into a safe place. If you hold that rhythm, you hold the truth better than any single law can give it. Soon, when you ask for the rap, we will close our open loops, set the lamps out one by one, and let the room grow fully dark. For now, the window stays open, the sea air is soft, and the wardrobe of words hangs still, ready for one last look in gentle light. Let the lamps we lit at the start go out one by one. We promised to fix our words, and we did. Concubine in this story meant a partner who lived inside a man's house, without the ceremony that made a wife. She was not the same as a courtesan who chose clients at dinners, nor the same as a maid hired only for work. She stood close to the body of the home, closer than the theater's easy masks admit, and her place changed with law, money, and the temper of the people under that roof. We asked if a woman in that role could keep savings or gain freedom. Often she could, though not with the safety a wife's dowry gave. Small coins tucked away, gifts witnessed by friends, a manumission cut into stone, a clause to remain in exchange for food and room. These were quiet tools that turned hope into plans. None of them erased risk, but together they made a path that many walked. When luck failed, reputation from the market and the well gave her a second voice. We wondered about children. In strict cities like Athens, the law loved categories. A wife's children stepped into citizenship. A palaki's children usually did not, unless a father took extra steps the city allowed. Yet kitchens ignored tidy lines. Babies reached for the hands that soothed them. Mother's wife or palaki taught skills that travel anywhere, and fathers could be tender in ways that paper could not measure, arranging training, giving gifts, and sometimes adopting to make a bridge across rules. We asked what a day felt like. It felt like bread at dawn, thread at noon, errands in shade, and ledgers at dusk. It felt like sharing space with a wife when peace was possible, or moving in careful patterns when pride was tender. It felt like work that kept rooms steady and like timing that kept tempers cool. It was not a stage of endless drama. It was the slow art of making a life inside lines you could not draw yourself. We widened the map and saw how the same words wore different seams in other towns, in royal courts, and later under Rome. We also saw the limits of our viewmen's speeches. Jokes from the stage, scraps of papyruso. We filled the gaps with small human acts you can trust. Water carried, scales balanced, favors returned. If you remember only one thing, let it be this: dignity in that world was a practice, not a prize. Paper where possible, savings were allowed, and steady conduct where nothing else could be counted. Now the room can grow quiet. The wardrobe of words hangs still. Wife Palaki, Hitira Dul. You know their shapes, and you know how real lives slipped between them. If you like this pace, you can subscribe, and we can walk another careful path together on another night. For now, let the window close, the air turn soft, and your breath find the slow rhythm of a house at rest. The story will keep watch while you sleep.